Okay, then we're joined with another former Loughborough College student. I'll let you introduce yourself, sir.
So I'm Matt Lamin, S&C over at London Irish Rugby Club.
And you was at the college, we've been talking before this, 2013.
Yeah, 2013 to 2015, yeah.
Okay, wow. Okay, so we're talking nearly 7 years ago now.
Yeah, time flies.
So you did the BTEC Sport, the same course that some of these guys will be doing now. And you got some good grades, from what I can remember. You had decent grades?
Yeah, so managed to get good grades. Hadn't got great grades prior to college.
Yeah.
But managed to get my head down a bit during my time at Loughborough, yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously you played for the Rugby Academy as well while you was at the college.
Yeah, so a few great years for the I think we'd actually the rugby stuff had just been set up in my first year.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the start of it also. Yeah, some good years playing with those boys and seeing how they've got on now. Okay,
so we're looking at, obviously you work at London Irish and you're the strength and conditioning coach there. What's been your path to that? Obviously you did the BTEC Sport, but kind of what else has been your path towards that career?
Yeah, so post Loughborough, I moved to London to St Mary's in Twickenham. I did my undergrad there in strength and conditioning science. During my time there, did a few accreditations, including the UK SEA. So that's the UK Strength and Conditioning Association, which is our sort of governing body within the UK. There's a few equivalents, depending if people are looking overseas through the NSCA. So did both of those. Managed to finish my undergraduate degree with a first class honours.
Yeah.
I then had a period of time post uni where I wasn't working within S&C, which I think we'll get back to a little bit later, and then eventually found my role with London Irish.
Okay, so obviously the degree helps and the BTEC helps and things like that as well. What could our learners be doing right now if they're kind of 16, 17, kind of looking at what opportunities, they want to be a strength and conditioning coach like yourself. What can they do that's going to give them real good kind of skills, towards their overall end kind of goal?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that people will find when they start trying to get into these roles, or even trying to get into internships, is it's incredibly saturated. So S&C is quite well established within the UK now. There are a lot of young people trying to get into it, and the qualifications are becoming more widely available. So there are more essentially S&C coaches, and there are very few S&C jobs still. So, people that are looking to get into this field, I would hammer internships, shadowing, any volunteer opportunities that they can get themselves involved into. And I think even within that, I was very much rugby focused, and a lot of my volunteer work was rugby focused. If I could do it again, I would look to work with a wider array of athletes, of coaches, of environments. The amount you can take out of spending one day a week with a qualified coach in a decent establishment is massive. Whether it's cues for coaching, whether it's different exercise methods, whether it's building relationships with clients, it's huge. So I would definitely push that side of it. And also, don't be afraid to coach. So find opportunities where you're not only shadowing a coach or you're in an environment, but find something where you can go out of your comfort zone and you can actually coach people, whether it's your siblings, your parents, your peers at college in the sports teams, or whether it is an external environment whereby a coach will allow you to work with one of his clients under supervision. I think you can get a massive amount from that prior to starting any sort of qualification pathway.
Yeah, definitely. I think another thing that these guys can do now as well is I keep trying to tell them is read around the subject. So follow some S&C coach on Twitter. Follow yourself. Start reading around some of the strategies, the training plans that people put in place. And actually try and build your knowledge up outside of just your BTEC and your degree. Have an opinion, trying to have a look at what's happening outside there in professional sport.
Yeah, 100%. So even now, and I use things like Google Scholar, and I will look at research articles, etc. But even now, one of my biggest resources is social media. There are a wealth of information on Instagram, on Twitter, LinkedIn for those that have it, of people giving out free content, especially during this time. It's been a really good time for the S&C community. Some really, world-leading coaches are giving out a lot of free content, and it's not stuff that's hard to find. So any sort of strength conditioning, physiotherapy, rehab-based stuff, start reading around it. And at the very least, it'll create some thinking, potentially around programming around different areas. But there is such a wealth of information out there that is simplified for people to understand, and it'll just start that learning process.
And I think you make a good point there about trying to look at different sports as well, because I think some people get so fixated with their own sport, but there's so many jobs out there. I mean, one of the biggest growth areas in the next 10 years is women's sports, in all different sports, whether that's rugby, hockey, all these different things. They need strength and conditioning coaches, they need analysts. And I think people need to understand that, you've got to think sometimes outside the box of where you can do. A lot of individual athletes require strength and conditioning coach, etc.
Yeah, so as I say, I was guilty of this, and it felt sort of fortunate for me in the fact I ended up in rugby. But if I was then going to look at a different pathway and move into a different sport, I would have to go through this process again, and I would have to go and volunteer and work in different industries and environments to then understand that. I think when you're younger, before you actually get into this environment, is the time to do it, and just get a wealth of information. A lot of companies now, so like the UKSEA, the English Institute of Sport, if you work for them and you're working with Olympic sports, you could be working with a canoeist, a skier, a racket sport, a team sport, all at the same time. And the knowledge you need to do that is huge. So the more you can lay the foundations of having a really good understanding of individual athletes, team sports, court sports, field-based sports, the better you'll set yourself up. But then when you start learning theory, you'll have a lot more to apply it to.
So in terms of qualifications then to become a strength and conditioning coach, it's more or less, degrees, strength and conditioning degrees or sports science that focus in that, and then doing a master's outside of it, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think the undergraduate degree would be a minimum. You've then got the UKSEA accreditation, which some parties will have as a preferred, some parties will have as a mandatory, and then you've got your masters on top of that. I think just from being in the environment, so like our head of strength conditioning doesn't have a master's. When he was studying, that wasn't really a required criteria. I think because it's becoming more widely available, there are more coaches, it's definitely going the way that you would at least need an undergraduate degree, and it would be beneficial to get a UKSEA as well, just to stand you in the best stead sort of moving forwards.
Yeah. So what's the good parts of your job and what's kind of the bad parts?
So the good parts, there's a lot of fulfillment within S&C. So especially with youth S&C, like I primarily work with, you have a massive influence over young athletes, obviously from a physical perspective, but also from a behavioural perspective. And you get to see these lads sort of grow into young men and go off to university, become professional athletes, whatever it might be. And of course, the tangible sides of it I've had lads now go off to junior England pathways and get first team caps, etc. So they're the little moments where you're like, yeah, do you know what? All the time we spent with him was worth it. So I think there's a lot of fulfillment. And I enjoy doing what I do. Being in a gym, coaching people. If I didn't have this as a job, it's something I'd be doing anyway. And I think if you can say that, then you can say, actually, yeah, I really do enjoy my job. So a lot of enjoyment. I think negatives, it's hard work. There are very long unsociable hours. Your pay might not always reflect how hard you work. So I think anyone looking to get into this industry, has got to enjoy it, because you have to work really hard. Expectations are very high, and sometimes the acknowledgement of that isn't always reflective. I'm very fortunate in the environment that I'm in that, I'll get that recognition, but it is something to be aware of. So yeah, it's a tough lifestyle, but I think going back to the positive side of it, all of that would make those long hours worth it. And if you are doing something you enjoy, I've done 13, 14-hour days and it's flown by because I'm busy, I'm hands-on, onto the next session, onto the next job, and I've still got a smile on my face at the end of it. So you've got to be aware of the hours that you'd be expected to do. But if you enjoy it, it does make it that bit easier.
No, it does. I think if you find a job that you feel like you're not working on, you don't really work a day, do you? You're kind of doing things that you're passionate about, and that's huge. What's your kind of like your progression then? What do you want to do in the future? Is it to be head of S&C at a rugby club? Is it to be England Rugby's S&C? Where do you want to see yourself?
So difficult to say. I think the honest answer is I don't know. The standard sort of progression would be head of academy S&C, senior S&C, and then sort of like head of performance, overseeing the sort of rehab and S&C side. I certainly at the minute am very interested in youth athletic development, how to take a young athlete to become a senior professional athlete. So I really am focused on staying in this sort of environment with the academy setup. That's sort of where my interest is. There's loads of overseas opportunities out in the States, collegiate sports, Australia. They've got some really good setups with the Australian Institute of Sport. So I wouldn't write anything off there. I think I'm happy within rugby, so it's likely to stay within some form of contact sport.
Yeah.
But yeah, something along the youth pathway, I think, will be hopefully where I'm heading.
So the last question then, Matt, if I could take you back to 2014, sit you in one of my classes, what would you tell young Matt who was 16, 17? What advice would you give him?
I think young Matt, probably similar to myself now, always looked ahead and wanted a really clear plan of where I was going to go in the next week, year, decade. And honestly, it's just not that important at that time. So essentially relax on that. I think one of my biggest learnings that I had sort of at college and post-college was you can achieve far more. So I remember coming to college and wanting to get into teaching. I enjoyed S&C, but thought I could never make a career out of that. And I think that realisation that I'm in a great opportunity, I'm still young, I'm just starting this learning pathway, there's no reason why I can't do it. And obviously I'm in a fortunate position now to say that having got there. But I think, relax. You don't need a plan for the next 5-10 years, but start to build passions, interests, follow them, and often that will then become your career. So relax and aim high.
Fantastic advice, Matt. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Cheers, Danny.